All right, welcome to the homework solutions video for assignment 3.05 number 3. And that's questions 12 and 13 from pages 546 and 547 in the textbook. So question 12, we have a table of data. Jerry says, to predict the average monthly temperature for Prince George next November, I just have to look at the table. The temperature will be negative 1.6 Celsius. That's the data point we see at month 11 for November. I don't need to bother doing a regression. Do you agree with Jerry? Explain. So I personally do not agree with Jerry. Simply put, if we start this regression, next November will be month 23. And month 23 is actually predicting a temperature of more like 7 degrees rather than the 1.6. So that's a very different piece. Now, some of that may be in our period. If we take a look at 2 pi and divide it by the 0.47, actually, I wonder if we could just divide it by b. Yes. So our regression is coming up with a 13-month difference. So you could use this, the fact that the period is off by a little over a month in our regression, as an argument to support Jerry, saying that last year's data may be more accurate. At the same time, you could also say, well, if we don't get a clear 12-month regression on this, maybe there is something going on with the climate, and maybe we can expect next year to be very different than this year. So at this point, I do generally think a regression analysis will be more accurate than just looking at a 1-year sample. The problem is this regression is only based on a 1-year sample. I would personally like to go back through the records and get multiple years to see what all the trends are for Prince George. So question 13 gives monthly average temperatures in degrees Celsius for 2 communities. So these, one of them is Hay River, and the other is Mar del Plata. And we're going to be doing comparative analysis of 2 of them. So give me a moment while I enter the data. Okay, so now the data has been entered for both cities, and I have set up our 2 different regressions so we can view them simultaneously. So the first city, Hay River, is this lower curve with a much larger range, and the upper city is Mar del Plata. That is the x2, y2 data. So part A, determine the equations of the regression for each city. Does each function fit the data closely? And, well, based on the eyeball, it looks almost like the top one fits better than the bottom one, but there's also less variation. So you're better off looking at actual residuals. So the residuals of our bottom graph are these blue dots, and these are the residuals of the top graph. So the residuals are the difference between the data and the line. So here, this blue dot is above the line. That's the residuals on this one, because this dot is above the line. This one is below, because our data is below the line. So this is, the residuals are basically your data point minus the value of the regression line. And the blue dots are further from the curve on average than the green dots. So they both are a good fit for the data, but the Mar del Plata, Argentina data is a better fit for its regression curve than Hay River, Northwest Territories is. If we compare the graphs, Mar del Plata has a much more consistent temperature throughout the year. Much higher average. The average temperature is 14, and it's only got an amplitude of 6. So it really only varies by full range of 12 degrees during the year. Whereas the Hay River data, the average is -4, so it's much colder on average, but also a much bigger variation, give or take 20 degrees. So how does the location of each community affect its average monthly temperatures? Well, the Northwest Territories versus Argentina, one of them is much closer to the ocean, which is a moderating effect on the temperature, and also much closer to the equator, which brings up the average temperature. On about what dates would you expect the two communities to have the same temperature? That should be our points of intersection. So about halfway through May, and then near the tail end of August, because that's where the graphs intersect. So the average monthly temperatures in degrees Celsius for city X are given below. Is this city north or south of the equator? And provide your reasoning. So this is a completely different city with a completely different set of data. So let's turn off the data and the residuals here and quickly enter the data for the third city. So now we have the data and the regression fit for our third city. And is the city north or south of the equator? So the city's warmest temperature, that maximum, comes in about February. The coldest temperature, or the minimum, comes in about August. So that implies a February summer and an August winter. So this would have to be south of the equator. So this is that southern hemisphere weather pattern. That concludes homework assignment 3.0. Actually, I was saying 3.05. It's actually 3.08. I've been getting it wrong all day. But that's homework 3.08, number 3, which also concludes all the homework for the first semester of our course.